In 1881, archaeologists opened a hidden tomb carved into the limestone cliffs of Deir el-Bahari, Egypt. Inside, they found something extraordinary. Not gold, not treasure, but 50 of the most powerful rulers in human history, hidden together in secret for 3,000 years. Among them was one body that would unlock secrets about royal life in ancient Kemet that we never knew existed. Secrets written in bone, coded in DNA, preserved in flesh. This is the story of what one 3,000-year-old mummy revealed about the most sophisticated royal system the ancient world had ever seen. When you think of ancient Egypt, Kemet, you think of pyramids, pharaohs, gold masks, hieroglyphs carved into temple walls. But here's what most people don't know. The royals of Kemet weren't just building monuments. They were conducting one of the longest-running experiments in human genetics, political strategy, and dynastic preservation in history. For over 3,000 years, they maintained a system of royal succession so precise, so calculated, so deeply intertwined with their understanding of the cosmos that every marriage, every birth, every child was part of a living political and spiritual architecture. And this mummy, this body gave us a window into exactly how that system worked, not from scrolls or hieroglyphs, but from the bones themselves. Think about that. A civilization so advanced that 3,000 years after their deaths, their bodies still teach us things we never imagined, things that modern science is only now beginning to understand. The tomb at Deir el-Bahari wasn't meant to be found. It was created during the 21st dynasty, hundreds of years after the great pharaohs had died. By then, the Valley of the Kings had been ransacked by grave robbers. Royal mummies were being torn apart for jewelry, for amulets, for gold wrapped within the linen bandages. The sacred had become profitable. The divine had become commodity. So the priests who remained, the keepers of the old knowledge, did something extraordinary. They gathered the bodies of the greatest kings and queens of the 18th, 19th, and 20th dynasties. Ramesses II, who ruled for 67 years and built monuments that still stand today. Seti I, the warrior pharaoh who expanded the empire to its greatest extent. Thutmose III, the Napoleon of ancient Egypt, who led 17 military campaigns and never lost a battle. Queen Amosa Nefertari, the matriarch of the 18th dynasty, who was deified in her own lifetime and worshipped for centuries after her death. Some of the most powerful human beings who ever lived, and they hid them together in a single, unmarked tomb carved into a cliff face. Picture this. You're a priest in the 21st dynasty. Your entire world is collapsing. The empire that once stretched from Nubia to Syria is fracturing into competing territories. Grave robbers are everywhere, tearing through sacred ground with impunity. Foreign powers are watching, waiting for the final collapse. But you have one sacred duty. Protect the royal ancestors. Protect the bodies that house the spirits of those who made Kemet the center of the world. So you move them in secret. Under cover of night, you and your fellow priests transport these mummies from their original tombs. You rewrap them with care, using techniques passed down through generations. You label them with your own hand, writing in hieratic script on the linen wrappings. You whisper prayers as you work, knowing that you are handling the physical remains of living gods. And you seal them away in a tomb that only you and a handful of others know exists, hoping that one day someone will find them and remember. Remember that these were not just kings. They were the architects of civilization itself. For 2,000 years, that tomb remained hidden, while empires rose and fell above ground, while Greece conquered Egypt and Rome conquered Greece, while Christianity spread and Islam was born, and the modern world slowly took shape. Those 50 bodies lay undisturbed in the darkness. Until 1881, when a family of local grave robbers accidentally discovered the cache and began selling artifacts from it on the black market. When Egyptologists traced the artifacts back to their source and finally entered the tomb, they found themselves standing in the presence of history itself. Among the 50 mummies in that cache was one that fascinated researchers immediately. The body was small, delicately preserved. The wrapping was intricate, done with a level of care that suggested someone of extraordinary importance. The cartouche markings indicated royal lineage, possibly from the 18th or 19th dynasty. But it was what modern science would reveal decades later that changed everything. When researchers began to study this mummy with technology that didn't exist even 50 years ago, CT scans that could see through linen wrappings without disturbing them, DNA sequencing that could extract genetic information from tissue thousands of years old, bone density analysis that could reveal diet and disease, isotopic studies that could tell us where someone grew up and what they ate, they discovered something profound. This body contained a complete medical record, written not in papyrus but in bone and tissue, a record of royal life that no hieroglyph could ever fully capture, and what it revealed was breathtaking. Here's what the mummy showed us. First, the royals of Kemet understood genetics before genetics had a name. They didn't have microscopes, they didn't have Mendel's pea plants or Watson and Crick's double helix, but they had something equally powerful. They had 3,000 years of recorded lineages. They knew that bloodlines carried traits, that certain marriages produced certain outcomes, that strength, intelligence, and the divine right to rule could be concentrated through strategic unions. They knew which families produced strong rulers, which marriages created stability, which unions consolidated power, and which ones weakened it. This wasn't random, this wasn't superstition. This was strategic biology practiced at a civilizational scale. Think about that level of calculation. Most ancient societies barely kept records beyond a few generations. Kemet was tracking bloodlines across millennia and making political decisions based on that data. Second, they understood the cost, and they made the choice anyway. The body revealed conditions that modern science can now identify with precision. Bone malformations consistent with repeated close family marriages, skeletal structures that showed genetic traits concentrated through generations of strategic unions, dental conditions that suggested not just dietary practices but possible hereditary factors, signs of medical intervention, evidence that Kemetic physicians were treating these conditions with sophisticated techniques. They knew that marrying within the family created certain risks. But here's the sophistication that most people miss. They weighed those risks against political stability, against foreign influence, against the dissolution of a system that had kept Kemet the most powerful civilization on Earth for millennia. They made a calculated decision: preserve the divine bloodline, maintain absolute political control, and manage the medical consequences with the most advanced healthcare system in the ancient world. That's not primitive. That's not blind tradition. That's strategic thinking operating at a level most civilizations never achieved. They were playing a generational game, while other kingdoms were barely thinking beyond the next harvest season. When researchers began running advanced tests on royal mummies in the 1990s and 2000s, they unlocked knowledge that would have amazed even the ancient Kemetic physicians. And understand this, Kemet had some of the most advanced physicians in the ancient world. Not according to legend, according to documented evidence that we can still read today. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, a medical text from around 1600 BCE, describes 48 surgical cases with diagnostic precision that wouldn't be matched in Europe for another 3,000 years. It includes detailed instructions for examining patients, diagnosing conditions, and determining prognosis. It describes three categories of outcomes: treatable, manageable, and untreatable. This document shows a medical tradition based on empirical observation, not just magical thinking. The Ebers Papyrus, another medical text from the same period, contains over 700 remedies for various conditions: treatments for eye diseases, remedies for digestive problems, contraceptive formulas, pain management techniques. Some of these remedies have been tested by modern researchers and found to have genuine pharmacological properties. The ancient Kemetic physicians weren't guessing. They were experimenting, documenting, and refining treatments over generations. So when we study these royal bodies today, we're not discovering that they were primitive. We're discovering that they were making informed choices with the knowledge they had. And that knowledge was considerable. In 2010, a team of Egyptian and international researchers published a groundbreaking study in the Journal of the American Medical Association. They had analyzed the DNA of 11 royal mummies from the 18th dynasty, including King Tutankhamun, the boy pharaoh whose tomb was discovered intact in 1922. What they found was extraordinary. They could trace 5 generations of a single royal family with genetic precision. They could see exactly who was related to whom, who married whom, who produced which heir. They mapped the family tree of the Amarna period, one of the most controversial and transformative periods in Kemetic history. King Tutankhamun's parents were identified through DNA as full siblings. His grandparents were also closely related, possibly first cousins or uncle and niece. His wife, Ankhesenamun, was his half-sister, sharing the same father. The genetic data was unambiguous. This was a family that had concentrated the royal bloodline through multiple generations of close marriages. But here's what's fascinating. Despite the genetic challenges this created, despite the health issues that DNA analysis revealed, Tutankhamun still ruled Egypt. He still maintained the empire. He still commissioned monuments and maintained diplomatic relations with foreign powers. He still performed the ritual duties of a living god. The system worked, even when individual bodies struggled. The political architecture remained stable. That's political genius. That's a level of institutional design that most civilizations never achieved. They built a system so robust that it could survive weak rulers, child kings, female pharaohs, foreign invasions, and internal strife. For 3,000 years, the mummy we're focusing on revealed something even more surprising: evidence of medical treatment, sophisticated medical treatment, fractures that had been set and healed properly, showing that Kemetic physicians understood bone structure and healing processes, signs of surgical intervention in the dental area, possibly to address pain or infection, evidence of medicinal compounds in the tissue, remedies made from plants, minerals, and animal products that have been identified through chemical analysis. The royal physicians weren't just treating symptoms, they were managing chronic conditions. They understood pain management through opium derivatives and willow bark extracts, the ancient precursors to modern aspirin. They understood infection control through honey applications and copper-based compounds, both of which have genuine antimicrobial properties. They were practicing personalized medicine 3,000 years ago, tailoring treatments to individual patients based on careful observation and documented case histories. Picture this. You're a royal physician in the 18th dynasty. You've trained for years under master healers who themselves trained under masters stretching back generations. You have access to medical texts that document centuries of accumulated knowledge. Your patient is the pharaoh, a living god, the earthly embodiment of Horus. But you know the body is human. You know it can fail. You know that despite all the prayers and rituals and divine protections, this body needs your skill. So you use everything in your knowledge. Herbs from the Nile Delta, that reduce inflammation, minerals from the eastern desert that promote healing, techniques passed down through generations of healers, refined through trial and error and careful documentation. You examine the patient with systematic precision. You palpate the abdomen. You check the pulse at multiple points on the body. You observe the eyes, the skin, the tongue. You ask questions about symptoms and duration. You consult your texts and your colleagues. And then you prescribe treatment based on evidence, not just hope. You document everything on papyrus. You train apprentices in your methods, passing on not just recipes, but diagnostic approaches. You refine your techniques based on outcomes. You are part of a medical tradition so advanced that it will influence Greek and Roman medicine for centuries to come. Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, will study in Egypt. Galen will reference Egyptian medical knowledge in his texts. The entire foundation of Western medicine will be built in part on knowledge developed in the halls of Kemetic temples. This is what the mummy revealed. Not scandal, sophistication, not failure, achievement, not primitive superstition, advanced science operating within a framework that modern researchers are only now beginning to fully appreciate. Let's talk about why the royal bloodline system existed, because once you understand the why, the how becomes fascinating. Kemet wasn't just a kingdom. It wasn't just a state with a government and an army and a tax system. Kemet was a theological political empire, a civilization built on the fundamental principle that the divine and the earthly were not separate realms, but interconnected aspects of the same reality. The pharaoh wasn't just a king in the way we understand monarchy today. He was the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon god who represented divine kingship. He was the son of Osiris, the god of death and resurrection, who represented the eternal cycle of renewal. He was the beloved of Ra, the sun god who represented cosmic order and daily rebirth. The queen wasn't just a wife or a consort. She was often the living embodiment of Hathor, the goddess of love and fertility and royal legitimacy, or Isis, the goddess of magic and wisdom and protective power. This wasn't symbolic in the way we use that word today. This was constitutional. This was the legal and spiritual foundation of the entire civilization. The divine bloodline was what legitimized rule. It's what allowed Egypt to remain stable for 3,000 years, while other civilizations rose and fell in the span of generations. It's what prevented endless civil wars over succession. It's what created a sense of cosmic order that permeated every level of society. So when a pharaoh married his sister, his half-sister, or his cousin, it wasn't about biology in the way we think about it today. It was about maintaining a divine monopoly on power. It was about ensuring that only those who carried the blood of the gods could sit on the throne of Horus. It was about creating a system so tightly controlled that foreign powers couldn't infiltrate it through marriage alliances. It was about preserving Ma'at, the cosmic principle of order, balance, and justice that held the entire universe together. And it worked. For 3,000 years, it worked. Think about that timeline. The pyramids at Giza were built around 2500 BCE. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, died in 30 BCE. That's 2,170 years. The pyramids are as old to Cleopatra as Cleopatra is to us. The same royal system, the same divine bloodline concept, the same political architecture lasted longer than the entire history of Christianity, longer than Islam, longer than any modern nation-state on earth today. That's not primitive. That's not backward. That's mastery of governance at a scale we can barely comprehend. While most civilizations were lucky to maintain stability for a few generations, Kemet was operating a political system that spanned millennia. Here's some perspective that should blow your mind. While Kemet was running this sophisticated system of dynastic succession, what were other civilizations doing? Most were dealing with constant civil war over succession. In ancient Mesopotamia, brothers routinely killed brothers to secure the throne. In the Greek city-states, political instability was so common that most democratic experiments lasted only a few generations before collapsing into tyranny or conquest. In early Rome, the struggle between patricians and plebeians nearly destroyed the republic multiple times. But in Kemet, the succession was clear. The bloodline was divine. The system was protected by religion, law, and tradition so deeply embedded in the culture that questioning it was literally unthinkable. Pharaohs could be strong or weak, brilliant or mediocre, beloved or feared. It didn't matter. The system continued. The Nile flooded. The harvest came. The temples received their offerings. The cosmic order held. This is why Kemet produced the longest-lasting continuous civilization in human history. This is why when the Greeks finally conquered Egypt under Alexander the Great, they didn't replace the pharaonic system. They adopted it. The Ptolemaic dynasty, Greek by ethnicity, became pharaohs in the Egyptian style. They married their siblings. They performed the ancient rituals. They maintained the divine bloodline concept because they understood that this system was the key to controlling Egypt. When Rome finally absorbed Egypt after Cleopatra's death, they didn't call it a province like other conquered territories. They called it the personal property of the emperor, because whoever controlled Egypt controlled the grain supply that fed Rome itself, and whoever controlled the pharaonic system controlled Egypt. What the Mummy and others like it reveal is that the royal system wasn't rigid, it was adaptive. When health issues appeared, they adjusted. Queens became regents, stepping in when pharaohs were too young or too ill to rule effectively. Co-regencies were established with fathers and sons or mothers and daughters ruling together to ensure smooth transitions. Non-royal wives were elevated to royal status when strategic needs demanded it. They used adoption. They used divine designation, where a god would speak through an oracle to confirm a successor. They used strategic marriages with foreign powers when necessary to secure peace or trade routes. The famous Queen Hatshepsut ruled as pharaoh, not queen, for over 20 years during the 18th dynasty. She didn't rule as a regent for her stepson Thutmose III. She declared herself pharaoh, wore the false beard and the royal regalia, and commissioned monuments showing herself in male form because the role of pharaoh was technically masculine. The system allowed for this. The divine bloodline could flow through women as well as men. She was the daughter of a pharaoh married to her half-brother who was also a pharaoh and the mother of royal children. Her blood was as divine as any man's. Nefertiti, the famous queen of Akhenaten during the Amarna period, possibly ruled alongside her husband as a full co-regent. Inscriptions from the period show her performing royal rituals, usually reserved for pharaohs. After Akhenaten's death, some scholars believe she ruled briefly under a different name before Tutankhamun took the throne. The evidence is debated, but the possibility itself is revealing. The system was flexible enough to accommodate female rule when circumstances demanded it. The royal women of Kemet weren't decorative. They weren't passive. They were political operators with real power, real authority, and real agency within the system. And the bloodline system actually enabled this, because if only royals could rule, then royal women had legitimate claims to power. Their blood was as divine as their brothers or fathers or husbands. This is why Kemet produced more powerful female rulers than any other ancient civilization. While most ancient societies were excluding women from power entirely, while women in other kingdoms were essentially property traded between royal houses, Kemet was crowning women as living goddesses with the power to command armies, commission monuments, and shape the destiny of the empire. Think about that. The same system that concentrated power through bloodline also created pathways for women to wield that power directly. That's sophisticated social engineering. That's a level of political complexity that challenges our assumptions about ancient societies. So what does this 3,000-year-old body actually tell us? It tells us that the royals of Kemet were operating at a level of political and strategic sophistication that most people never knew existed. They understood genetics not as DNA sequences, but as inherited traits and family patterns observable across generations. They understood medicine, and they practiced it at a level that wouldn't be surpassed for thousands of years. They understood political stability, and they created a system that outlasted every empire that rose and fell around them. They understood power, not just how to seize it, but how to maintain it across millennia. Not just how to rule, but how to create a system of rule so deeply embedded in cosmic and social order that it became self-sustaining. Not just how to build monuments, but how to build a civilization that those monuments represented. This wasn't primitive. This was advanced governance operating at a scale we're still trying to understand. And here's the part that should make you marvel. The fact that we can study this mummy at all is a testament to Kemetic preservation technology. 3,000 years, 3,000 years, and the body is still intact enough that we can extract DNA. We can see bone structure in minute detail. We can identify medical treatments and dietary patterns. We can trace genetic lineages and family relationships. The mummification process was so advanced that tissue samples remain viable for genetic testing millennia later. No other ancient civilization achieved this level of preservation. The Mesopotamians buried their dead in simple graves. The Greeks and Romans used cremation or basic burial. The Chinese developed elaborate tombs, but not preservation techniques that maintained tissue integrity. Only Kemet turned death into a science. Only Kemet understood decomposition, desiccation, and chemical preservation well enough to create bodies that would last for eternity. The process itself was extraordinary. First, the internal organs were removed through a small incision in the side. The brain was extracted through the nose using specialized hooks. These organs were preserved separately in canopic jars, each protected by a different deity. The body was then packed in natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture that drew out all moisture over a period of 40 days. After desiccation, the body was washed, anointed with oils and resins that had both preservative and sacred properties, and wrapped in hundreds of meters of linen strips. But here's what's remarkable. The embalmers weren't just following rote procedure. They were making decisions based on the condition of the body. They adjusted techniques for different circumstances. They used different resin mixtures for different purposes. They placed amulets and protective symbols at specific points on the body based on religious texts and medical knowledge. They were combining chemistry, anatomy, religion, and practical skill in ways that required years of training to master. These weren't primitive rituals. These were sophisticated technical procedures developed over centuries and refined to near perfection. The result? Bodies that have survived erosion, tomb robbers, environmental changes, and the passage of 3,000 years. Bodies that still teach us new things every time we develop a new technology to study them. They turned death into a science. They turned bodies into time capsules. And now, 3,000 years later, those time capsules are still teaching us. The discoveries made from studying royal mummies have revolutionized our understanding of ancient medicine, genetics, and political systems. They've shown us that Kemetic physicians were peer-reviewed and specialized. Medical texts describe hierarchies of healers, from general practitioners to specialists in specific areas, eye doctors, dentists, surgeons, each with their own area of expertise. their own texts, their own training traditions. They've shown us that royal women held power in ways we're only beginning to understand, not just as queens or regents, but as property owners, as priestesses with political influence, as diplomats who negotiated with foreign powers, as military leaders who commanded armies in times of crisis. The record is there in inscriptions and papyri and administrative documents, but it's been overlooked or minimized for generations. They've shown us that the civilization was making calculated, informed decisions about succession and governance based on sophisticated understanding of heredity, politics, and long-term stability. They weren't stumbling through history hoping for the best. They were planning generations ahead, creating systems designed to last centuries, building institutional structures that could survive individual failures. They've shown us that African political philosophy was sophisticated enough to create the longest-lasting empire in human history. Not through constant military conquest, though they certainly had military power. Not through economic dominance alone, though they controlled vast wealth, but through a combination of religious authority, political stability, strategic thinking, and a system of governance so well designed that it became the model other civilizations tried to copy. This is the story that was waiting in the bones. Not scandal, not failure, not the decline of a once great civilization brought low by its own mistakes. Achievement, innovation, sophistication. A civilization that understood genetics before the word existed. That practiced advanced medicine when most of the world was still using bloodletting and prayer alone. That created political systems stable enough to last 3,000 years. That elevated women to positions of real power when most civilizations considered them property. That turned death itself into a technology for preserving knowledge across millennia. The 3,000-year-old mummy from Deir el-Bahari is still being studied today. Every year, new technologies reveal more. Improved DNA sequencing techniques that can extract genetic information from ever smaller samples. Advanced imaging that can see through wrappings and reveal details invisible to earlier scans. Chemical analysis that can identify compounds in tissue and tell us what medicines were used, what foods were eaten, what environmental conditions the person lived in. More about diet. Recent studies have analyzed isotopes in bone tissue to determine not just what people ate, but where that food came from. Did they eat locally grown grain or imported foods? Did their diet change over their lifetime? Did royals eat differently than commoners? The answers are teaching us about trade networks, agricultural practices, and social hierarchies in ways written records never could. More about disease. We're identifying specific genetic markers for conditions that plagued ancient populations. We're seeing how diseases evolved over time. We're learning how Kemetic physicians treated these conditions and how effective those treatments were. Modern pharmacologists have tested some ancient remedies and found genuine therapeutic properties. The knowledge encoded in these bodies is contributing to modern medical research. More about life in the royal court. Chemical residues on skin and hair tell us what cosmetics and perfumes were used. Wear patterns on bones reveal what physical activities people engaged in. Dental analysis shows stress patterns from childhood through adulthood. Every body is a detailed record of an individual life lived thousands of years ago. But the most important thing this mummy has already revealed is this. The civilization of Kemet was far more sophisticated than most people ever learned. The royals weren't superstitious primitives making random choices based on ancient customs they no longer understood. They were strategic thinkers operating within a complex system of law, religion, science, and politics that they themselves had designed and refined over thousands of years. They were physicians who developed medical knowledge that influenced healing practices for millennia. They were architects who built structures so precisely engineered they still stand today. They were diplomats who maintained trade networks spanning 3 continents. They were rulers who created political stability that lasted longer than any civilization before or since. And they left us a record, written in stone in temple inscriptions that describe military campaigns, trade expeditions, religious festivals, and construction projects. Written in papyrus, in administrative documents, legal codes, medical texts, and literature. Written in their very bones, in the DNA that tells us who they were, how they lived, what they achieved, and what challenges they faced. That record continues to teach us thousands of years later. It teaches us that African civilizations were not peripheral to human history. They were central to it. It teaches us that the knowledge systems developed in Kemet influenced Greek philosophy, Roman law, and European science. It teaches us that political sophistication, medical advancement, and architectural genius were not inventions of later civilizations, but achievements built on African foundations. It teaches us that when we study history honestly, when we look at the evidence without preconceptions, when we let the bodies and the buildings and the texts speak for themselves, we discover a story far more complex, far more impressive, and far more important than the simplified narratives we were taught in school. If this story made you realize there's more to ancient African history than you were taught, you're right. There are hundreds of stories like this. Stories of innovation that changed human civilization. Stories of intelligence that solved problems we're still grappling with today. Stories of systems so sophisticated they still influence how we think about governance, medicine, and society. Stories written in bodies preserved for millennia, waiting for us to develop the technology to read them. Stories waiting in tombs yet to be discovered, in sites yet to be excavated, in archives yet to be fully translated. Stories of the kingdom of Kush, which conquered Egypt and ruled as pharaohs themselves, preserving and advancing Kemetic traditions. Stories of the empire of Aksum, which controlled Red Sea trade and influenced 3 continents. Stories of Great Zimbabwe, whose stone architecture rivaled anything built in medieval Europe. Stories of the Mali Empire, whose universities attracted scholars from across the Islamic world. Stories of the Benin Kingdom, whose bronze casting techniques were so advanced that European museums still struggle to explain them. Stories of African achievement, African innovation, African sophistication that have been overlooked, minimized, or deliberately erased from mainstream historical narratives. And we're bringing them back, one mummy at a time, one excavation at a time, one DNA sequence at a time, one story at a time. Because these aren't just historical curiosities, these are the foundations of human civilization itself, and they deserve to be known. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, if you want to learn more about the African civilizations that shaped human history, subscribe to Ancient Africa Untold. We're dedicated to bringing you the stories that textbooks left out, the discoveries that challenge what you thought you knew, the evidence that proves African history is world history. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a revelation. Share this with someone who needs to know that history is far more complex and far more African than they were taught. And leave a comment telling us what surprised you most about this story. Because this conversation, this reclamation of suppressed history, this bringing to light of knowledge that was always there waiting to be seen, this is just beginning. The mummy from Deir el-Bahari has been dead for 3,000 years, but the knowledge preserved in those ancient bones is more alive than ever, and there are thousands more waiting to teach us. Think about that.